Hello, welcome to this week's Prep Preview. Alongside Justin Conn, I'm Aren Dow. We're finally here. It's the playoffs. It's Week 10. A lot of exciting matchups and a couple of rematches between Maroa and Tuscola. You have St. T and Unity. A lot of new matchups. A lot of teams that probably people are familiar of all around the state. So, Justin, what do you think? Which team has the most favorable bracket they have to work with?
There's a couple of teams that I like their bracket. I'll start with Argenna Oriana. I don't know that they have the type of bracket they can go all the way to state with, but I definitely like their first couple of games. They start out, of course, this Saturday with Greenfield Northwestern, which plays in a smaller conference. And I know last year they got beat by a WIVC team too, but that was a little bit different type team in Camp Point Central. I think that Greenfield, they just don't see the type of team Argenna sees and is on a weekly basis. And I think Argenna can go, despite having it kind of stinks they had to go on the road the first round, but it almost plays into their advantage because they get a start on the road with a winnable game, then they come home when they win that one, they'll come home for the second round of the playoffs and play a number one seed in Downs Tri-Valley. It's a 9-0 team, but again, don't play quite the competition Argenna does, and I think Argenna has a real nice chance to beat Tri-Valley. At that point, then it's going to be tough because you have Casey, and if you were lucky enough to get past Casey and Maroa, but at the same time, it's been a while since Argenna's had any playoff success. So, to make it to if they can get this done and beat Greenfield and Tri-Valley, make it to the quarters, that's a nice season for them, and I think it's real doable for them.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the bracket right below Argenna with Casey, and I think Casey has a real, for those first two games, they have a real good shot of kind of getting those first two games right away. All three teams beatable. The 5 seed in that is Carrollton, who just lost to Camp Point Central 33-0. I think Carrollton is, kind of a weaker 5 seed as far as, Casey got a pretty good draw, I feel like, and maybe we'll see an Argenna Casey matchup that would be kind of fun to see. Casey coming to play a no-call team, but I think Casey has a real good chance of making those first two games.
We're tough. We're being awfully tough on the WIVC right now, especially the WIVC South with Greenfield and Carrollton. Honestly, those are great towns and great programs. I just feel like that the OCAW is a step above that. The OCAW is a 2A, 3A conference, and when you can go to 1A and play teams that only have played 1A all year, it's an advantage no matter what. And it doesn't always come out. Triopia was able to beat Central A&M last year, and of course, Camp Point Central had a nice run. But for the most part, I think it does sort of play that way to where you play bigger schools, it's to your advantage through the season.
For sure.
And another bracket that I think I like is Cerro Gordo Bement. Yeah. But at the same time, they sort of run into that problem where they play smaller schools all year. Then they're going to be playing New Berlin in the first round. Either Nokomis or Athens in the second round, and then if they get past that, it would probably be Auburn. I'm guessing Auburn in the quarters. I look at their entire bracket and say, you know what, Cerro Gordo can win. They can beat all these teams. There's nobody in this bracket that's that monster team that you're like, okay, they're not beating them. But at the same time, I also worry about them a little bit to the point where even New Berlin scares me a little bit. So, I think that could really go either way. Auburn, to me, I like them probably as the favorite just because, year in, year out, and with Coach Dave Bates, they're a great program. But I would not be surprised to see Cerro Gordo get through this. I would be surprised if they lost in the first round, but I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, it's so that one could really go either way. I think I like their bracket. That's what I guess I'm trying to say, Aren.
Yeah, no, and I agree. Cerro Gordo is one of those teams where you've seen they've been able to have huge plays. Some play action where Blickenserver's been able to throw to the halfback. Like I know the Lena Winslow game you saw at the beginning of the year. They have that where they can they have a lot of big plays with Steve Isbell, but they also have big play potential and some of the play action. As long as they can keep putting points on the board, I think they got a good shot against any team, really. I know the defense maybe got a few points against Villa Grove, but they played well against Arthur Lovington. I think Cerro Gordo has as good of a shot as anyone to kind of make it through those first games.
They're going to score points.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think that because they can grind it out too on you. If you want to go ahead and limit their big plays, they can do that. So, yeah, I think that's one thing they do have going for them is they're going to score points. We're going to move on to a team in the first round that can pull an upset that we really feel like has a good shot at it. There weren't a lot of choices here. We have, a lot of our teams are the higher seed and or they're the close seeds. So I'm going to go with one where I don't know that they're going to pull the upset, but I think they have a chance, and that's MacArthur. They go to normal U-High, of course. U-High's coached by former Tuscola quarterback Dusty Burke, and they run an offense that Burke would have loved to play in. I think it's pretty similar to what he did do at Tuscola with Stan Winkie as coach, where the quarterback does a lot of the work. He does a lot of the running and the passing, and he puts up huge numbers. Their quarterback, I believe, has near Hockaday-like numbers this year, where he's got like 24 touchdowns and like 1 or 2 interceptions. So, it's going to be tough. But again, MacArthur faces 6A teams all year. They face good 6A teams all year. U-High's in the Corn Belt, where they're facing 3A teams, some 4A teams. But that's definitely, MacArthur is going to have seen talent like U-High has. Whether
Right.
they can execute and go in and beat them, that's another story. But they won't go in there and be shocked by what they see. There's no question about that.
Team I'm looking at as far as an upset is Arthur Lovington against Salt Fork. I think those are two pretty evenly matched teams. I mean, it's a 7-10, and so it's not too huge of a difference. But yeah, I think Arthur played really well throughout the entire season. Had a tough loss against Cerro Gordo, had a real close. I mean, they were ahead of that game against Bismarck Henning all week 9 until kind of a last minute touchdown by Bismarck Henning. And Salt Fork played Bismarck, pretty much the same score. They lost by 3, Arthur lost by 6. So a pretty similar matchup when you kind of look at how those teams played Bismarck Henning. But Tyler Schuring, he's played really well in the big games. He played really well against Villa Grove. He had a ton of yards. It was 11 for 18 passing. I think this is his 3rd year in the offense. He's really kind of come into his own. I think that whole team, a lot of seniors on that team, I think this is kind of the year where they've been able to have use that experience a little bit and hopefully kind of get past maybe last year that first round loss, get a win that first round, and they'll have a tough matchup if they get through. But I think that's a really winnable game for Arthur.
Yeah, and I would argue that is a legitimate upset call because Salt Fork's in the playoffs every year,
Yeah.
and I think they had one of the longer playoff runs in 1A. And Arthur is still pretty new to this. They had Carlinville in the first round last year, which was a great team. I mean, they almost beat Casey Westfield in the second round. So, I mean, that was a really nasty first-round matchup. I think this is a much more manageable one. Like you said, it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a real close game. Whoever kind of does whatever it takes at the end will win. But, yeah, I agree that is a legit upset call, though, just because of the experience Salt Fork has in the playoffs.
Right.
So that should be a good one. And that was a game, we were going to talk about some of the best area first-round games, and I think that's probably top 3 for sure as far as best area first round games go. Another one is St. Teresa at Unity. We saw this game a few weeks ago. St. Teresa pulled the upset. And so now, you can look at it 2 ways. You go in knowing this is a team you can beat, but you also know that Unity seems like they are always geared up for this part of the season. So, you'll wonder, can they do it again? And I guess that's the big question going into that game.
Yeah, Unity, I think, maybe a lot of people think that maybe they're down this year. And, if you look, this is kind of the same thing that they had last year. They lost to A&M. They had a real close win against Maroa. They played Argenta. That was a real close game. A lot of the similarities that happened last year, there were a lot of close games, and Unity still went to the championship game, state championship game. St. T, it wasn't that they shut down Connor Grace. He had a pretty good game. I mean, he averaged more than 5 yards a carry. He played pretty well, and they were still able to get a win. So I think, St. T, they just kind of do the same things they did, in that previous game. Christian Williams continues to improve. I mean, you look at his numbers, and he's throwing a little bit more each game. He's getting a little better each game. As long as they can keep that going in the running game and that line, which has been pretty good all year, if that running game, if they get all 3 backs and they have kind of, they're all healthy and they're all ready to go, I think St. T is a pretty well-rounded team where, they could pull it upside again on Unity.
They will need to move the ball. I mean, that's the big thing. And Unity's played better defensively since that game.
Right.
So that's going to be a big thing. Can St. Teresa, because they were inconsistent against Monticello in week 9, and that's something they have the weapons. It's just a matter of executing, and that'll be, I think that'll be the difference in the game. Because Unity's, they're going to score some points on you. You could probably, as long as you limit them, no big plays, and you keep moving the ball on them, I think it could be another close game that, I think you got to give St. T a chance in this one. Yeah. Another one, we talked about Monticello a little bit. They play Champaign St. Thomas More, which this is a fun one because those 2 teams will be in the same conference next year in the new OCAW. And you kind of wonder how are Unity and Monticello and Maroa going to do against St. Joe and St. Thomas More. So this is kind of a nice, sort of a preview of that. And, St. Thomas More, it's going to be a close game, too. It's a great game. St. Thomas More has a quarterback in Storm Jupe who broke Urbana's Cameron Mammon's record for most passing yards in Champaign-Urbana area history. So, they have a for real quarterback, and Monticello's played great defense all year. It'll be tested pretty hard in that game.
And he has a fantastic name.
Yeah, great. That's the only reason I really even brought that one up. This is to talk about Storm Jupe. I hope maybe he can transfer into one. I think he's a senior, but that would be nice. One other team I want to talk about is, of course, Class A's #1 team, Maroa Forsyth. I think they have a much harder path. I'm not saying I think they'll win state. I've been saying that all year, and I think that's still the case. But you look at last year's path compared to this year's, and on paper, this is a lot tougher path because you get Tuscola. They should handle in the first round, and they should have a game they can win in the second round. But then you start getting to the quarterfinals. They'll have Camp Point Central, who was a 2A semifinalist last year, and that's not going to be an easy game. I think Maroa has more weapons, but that one scares you a little bit. Then they have Casey in the semis, possibly. That's another one where there's been a lot of years where Maroa's had some great teams and they run into Casey, and that's going to be a close game no matter what. That's going to be a great game. And then if they get to the championship game, if it's Stockton again, I feel confident. But there's a team on the other side of the bracket in Chicago Leo that we don't know much about. They haven't been in the playoffs since they were in 4A like 10 years ago. So they play in a huge conference. Their conference isn't that good, but their out-of-conference schedule is really good. They're a little bit of a wild card, not sure. They could get beat early and not have to worry about them, or they might be, all of a sudden the new juggernaut, and then that could make for a really fun championship game for Maroa. But Maroa's going to have to. They're going to be more tested this year for sure going into that.
No, I completely agree with you. I covered their second and third games in the playoffs, and they weren't even close. I know, one of the games, Brian Pierce was out, and the other, Carrollton was missing their starting running back, so that was kind of a mismatch after that. But they didn't really have any competition, through those first really 4 games. They just kind of blew those teams out.
Yeah, the first 4 games were all huge blowouts.
Yeah,
right.
And it really wasn't even close. And those teams, I remember, the teams were trying to get first downs, and they weren't even getting first downs. And this is the playoffs in the second, third round. You're talking about Camp Point Central. That's a really good team. Obviously, Casey has had all the history. I agree with you. I think Maroa has a tougher run this year in 1A than they did last year in 1A.
And I don't know that it's not a tougher road than 2A. Yeah. Than that side of the bracket even, because Auburn and Cerro Gordo are tough, but so are Casey and Camp Point, and obviously Camp Point 2 knocked out Cerro Gordo last year, and it's fairly similar teams. So yeah, it sort of makes it a little more fun. Yeah, I think that it was maybe a little bit of a downer that Maroa was going to be in 1A, thinking it'd be a little more of a challenge in 2A, but maybe 1A is a little bit more of a challenge this year. It can be like that. When you have 8 classes, the difference between 1A and 2A is not huge. So, that's kind of the way it's going to go down. We're excited for the playoffs. It's going to be, great fun to cover this year. Make sure you check us out on hrpreps.com, of course, on Twitter, at hrpreps, on Facebook, and of course, in a print product as well.